We're terminating you effective immediately. Security will escort you out. That's what Chelsea Pemberton said without even looking up from her phone. Just like that. I'd been sitting in the conference room for exactly 14 minutes, and she was already showing me the door. I'm Gordon Winchester, 51 years old, and I've seen a lot of corporate nonsense in my time. But this was something else entirely. Let me back up. I'd been brought in as a board consultant to evaluate Pemberton Industries' restructuring proposal. 25 years in corporate finance, former CFO at 2 Fortune 500 companies, and I knew their books better than most people knew their own checking accounts. The company had been in our family's investment portfolio for decades, but I'd never been actively involved in operations. That morning, I walked into their headquarters in downtown Minneapolis feeling pretty good about the liquidity position we were about to analyze. The receptionist seemed confused when I introduced myself, kept checking her computer screen like my name was spelled wrong or something. Should have been my first red flag. Chelsea was waiting in the main conference room, tapping her nails on the mahogany table. Edmund Pemberton's daughter-in-law, 29 years old, MBA from some expensive school, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having to earn anything. She'd been promoted to Chief Operating Officer 8 months ago, right after marrying into the family. Mr. Winchester, she said, still not making eye contact. I've reviewed your proposal, and frankly, we need leadership that understands modern efficiency metrics, not outdated legacy thinking. I adjusted my watch band, once a habit I developed over the years when processing unexpected market volatility. I'm sorry, what proposal? I'm here for the quarterly diversification assessment. That's when she finally looked up. Her eyes had that particular shine you see in people who think they're about to execute a brilliant strategic maneuver. The board has decided to move in a different direction. Your consulting services are no longer required. I felt my watch band click into place. Chelsea, I think there might be some confusion about my role here. There's no confusion. She slid a manila envelope across the table. This contains your termination documentation and final compensation calculation. Security will escort you to collect any personal items. Now, I've been through hostile acquisitions, board coups, and market crashes that would make grown men cry. But sitting there, listening to this kid dismiss 25 years of experience like I was some entry-level analyst, I had to run the numbers on exactly what was happening. The ghost of 2009 started whispering in my head. Enron-style executive arrogance. The way they'd looked at us like we were just portfolio assets to be liquidated. 400 employees losing their pensions while the C-suite walked away with golden parachutes. I could hear the same tone in Chelsea's voice, that particular frequency of entitlement that comes from people who've never had to calculate their own market value. I see, I said, adjusting my watch band again, and this decision came from the full board. The board supports leadership that can adapt to current market realities. She stood up, clearly expecting me to do the same. We need vision, not resistance to necessary cost optimization strategies. I stayed seated. Through the conference room's floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the parking lot where about 30 employees were taking their lunch break. Good people. Most of them had been with the company for 10 to 15 years, back when Edmund still ran day-to-day operations before his heart attack. Before Chelsea started implementing her efficiency metrics, cost optimization strategies, I repeated, letting the phrase settle. You mean the supplier diversification plan, moving from the local partnerships to overseas alternatives? Her smile got wider. Exactly. We're cutting overhead by 35% and streamlining our vendor relationships. Some people don't appreciate innovative approaches to margin enhancement. I opened the envelope she'd given me. Inside was a single page with my name spelled wrong, Gordon Winchester, and a check for $500, $500. For a consultation contract that should have been worth $50,000, there seems to be an error in the compensation calculation, I said. That covers today's time investment. Our legal team determined that's appropriate for services not rendered. The auditory patterns were all there. The slight uptick at the end of sentences that meant she was lying. The way she emphasized certain words to cover uncertainty. I'd heard the same vocal signatures from executives right before their companies collapsed. I folded the termination letter and put it back in the envelope. Chelsea, before I go, can I ask you something? Just professional curiosity. She checked her phone again. Make it quick. Have you reviewed the company's ownership structure recently? Of course. The Pemberton family maintains controlling interest through various holdings. She said it like she was reciting something from a textbook. I nodded slowly. And the Winchester Capital Group, that name ever come up in your due diligence phase? For the first time, she looked uncertain. Winchester Capital? I'm not familiar with that entity. Interesting. I stood up, straightening my jacket. Well, I suppose I should collect my things and head out. Security showed up right on cue. 2 guys in cheap suits who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. One of them, probably 50 years old, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too many of these corporate theater productions, gave me an apologetic shrug. Nothing personal, Mr. Winchester, he said, just following orders. I understand completely. I handed him my visitor badge. You fellows have been here long? 15 years for me, he said. Tony here's got 12. Good jobs, steady work. I looked back toward the conference room where Chelsea was already on her phone, probably reporting her successful execution of the morning's personnel action. Hope it stays that way. As we walked through the building, I noticed things. The way employees looked at the security escort, nervous glances, people who'd been through this routine before. The office cubicles had that particular emptiness that comes from recent layoffs, too much space between workstations, equipment sitting unused. In the elevator, Tony cleared his throat. Mr. Winchester, just so you know, most of us didn't think this was right. Word gets around, you know? People were saying you were here to help save jobs, not get fired. I adjusted my watch band one final time. Tony, can I give you some advice? In about 3 hours, there's going to be an emergency board meeting. Might want to keep your resume updated. They walked me to my car, and I drove exactly 1 block before pulling into a Starbucks parking lot. I had some calls to make. The first number I dialed was Janet Holloway, CFO and board chair. She picked up on the second ring. Gordon, how did the assessment go? Are you still at the office? Janet, I need you to call an emergency board meeting for 2 p.m. today. Emergency meeting? What happened? I've been terminated. Chelsea Pemberton just executed what she believes was a cost optimization strategy. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 7 seconds. I counted. She did what? Terminated my consulting agreement. Apparently, my approach to market analysis represents outdated legacy thinking that doesn't align with modern efficiency metrics. Gordon, she can't terminate board consultants. She doesn't have that authority. I'm aware of that, which is why we need to discuss the Winchester Capital Group's position in today's meeting. Another pause. Janet had been around long enough to understand corporate chess moves. Oh my God. Gordon, you don't mean... I mean exactly what I mean. 2 o'clock, Janet. Full board attendance, and Janet, make sure Chelsea is there. My second call was to Wesley Fontaine, the company's legal counsel and the only board member older than me. Wesley had been Edmund's attorney for 30 years, and he was the one who'd structured the inheritance trust that made everything possible. Wesley, it's Gordon. We have a situation, let me guess. Chelsea got creative with her authority again. She just terminated the Winchester Capital Group's consulting agreement. Wesley's laugh was the dry chuckle of someone who'd spent decades watching corporate Napoleons destroy themselves. Well, that's unfortunate for her. Can you have the ownership documentation ready for this afternoon's meeting? Already pulling the files. You know, Gordon, Edmund always said this day would come. He just hoped it would be later rather than sooner. Wesley, refresh my memory on the trust structure timeline. When exactly did my father and Edmund establish the partnership? 1997. You just graduated from business school, remember. Your father wanted to create a long-term investment vehicle, and Edmund needed expansion capital. Perfect alignment of interests. That's right. I was 22 when they shook hands on that deal. Fresh out of Northwestern with my finance degree, and no idea that handshake would define my career 25 years later. And when Edmund's kids showed no interest in the business, he doubled down on the partnership. Your father's stake went from 35% to 72% when Edmund bought out his other investors in 2003. Edmund always said the Winchester family understood the business better than his own children. My third call was the hardest one. Aaron Murphy, 31 years old, junior analyst, and one of the sharpest financial minds I'd ever worked with. I'd been mentoring him for 6 months, helping him understand portfolio diversification strategies that would set him up for the next 20 years of his career. Mr. Winchester, how's the evaluation going? Are we going to be able to keep the supplier partnerships? Aaron, I need you to listen carefully. In about 4 hours, there are going to be some major changes at the company. Some good, some challenging. Either way, I want you to remember what we talked about regarding risk management. Sir, you're scaring me a little. Don't be scared. Just be ready. And Aaron, start documenting everything related to the cost-cutting measures, safety protocols, supplier quality reports, employee feedback, everything. Yes, sir. Is there something I should know? You'll know everything you need to know by 3 p.m. But Aaron, whatever happens today, remember that integrity and competence always win in the long run. Sometimes it just takes longer than we'd like. I spent the next 2 hours in that Starbucks, running numbers and analyzing the situation from every angle. The market capitalization calculations were straightforward. Pemberton Industries was worth approximately $45 million based on current asset valuations. Winchester Capital Group owned 72% of outstanding shares, inherited through a trust structure that Edmund had established with my father in 1997. Chelsea had just fired the majority owner of her company. More importantly, she'd revealed her complete ignorance of the company's fundamental ownership structure. How do you implement cost optimization strategies without understanding who actually owns the assets you're optimizing? It was like trying to rebalance a portfolio without knowing which securities you actually held. At 1:45 p.m., I walked back into the Pemberton Industries building. Same receptionist, same confused look, Mr. Winchester, I thought. Didn't you leave earlier? I'm here for the board meeting. She checked her computer again. I don't show you on the meeting roster. Call Janet Holloway. She'll clear up any scheduling conflicts. The conference room was fuller this time. Janet sat at the head of the table, Wesley to her right with a stack of legal documents. 3 other board members I recognized from quarterly reports, and Chelsea looking significantly less confident than she had that morning. Gordon, Janet said as I entered, I think there's been a misunderstanding about this morning's events. I took my seat directly across from Chelsea. No misunderstanding, Janet. Ms. Pemberton executed a termination strategy based on her assessment of my consulting value. I respect decisive leadership. Chelsea's voice had lost some of its morning confidence. Mr. Winchester, I may have been hasty in my evaluation of the consulting arrangement. Hasty, I adjusted my watch band, feeling the familiar click of the mechanism. Chelsea, you told me the board supports leadership that can adapt to market realities. I couldn't agree more. Wesley opened his folder and pulled out the top document. Before we proceed, I think everyone should review the current ownership structure of Pemberton Industries. He slid copies around the table. I watched Chelsea's face as she read. The color drained from her cheeks like someone had opened a valve. Winchester Capital Group, she read aloud. 72% ownership stake. That's correct, I said. Established in 1997 through a partnership agreement between Edmund Pemberton and my father, Richard Winchester. When my father passed in 2019, his shares transferred to me through the family trust. The room got very quiet. I could hear the ventilation system humming, the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Gordon, Janet said carefully, does this mean? It means I own 72% of this company. It means when Ms. Pemberton terminated my consulting agreement this morning, she fired her boss. I looked directly at Chelsea. It also means I've had a front row seat to watch her cost optimization strategies destroy supplier relationships that took 25 years to build. Chelsea found her voice. I was implementing necessary efficiency measures, margin enhancement through vendor diversification. You were cutting costs by 35% and moving production to overseas suppliers with questionable quality standards. I've reviewed the customer complaint data from the last 8 months. Quality issues are up 400% since you started your efficiency initiatives. Wesley pulled out another document. I've also prepared a detailed analysis of the potential legal liability from the safety protocol modifications. The insurance exposure alone could bankrupt the company. One of the other board members, David Crane from operations, cleared his throat. Gordon, we've been concerned about these changes, but Edmund asked us to give Chelsea operational freedom. Edmund asked you to support family leadership, I said. He didn't ask you to ignore fiduciary responsibility to shareholders, which incidentally means me. Chelsea leaned forward. Gordon, I understand there's been confusion, but my strategies are based on proven business models. We're streamlining operations to compete in a global marketplace. Chelsea, I want you to understand something. When you walked into that conference room this morning and decided I represented outdated legacy thinking, you weren't just firing a consultant. You were telling the majority owner of this company that 25 years of financial expertise wasn't worth your time. I stood up, straightening my jacket. But more than that, you demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of risk management. You've cut costs without analyzing the compound effect on customer retention, employee morale, or supplier reliability. That's not strategic thinking. That's financial gambling. Chelsea's MBA training kicked in. Market disruption requires aggressive positioning. Sometimes you have to accept short-term friction for long-term gain. Short-term friction, I opened my briefcase and pulled out a folder. Let me show you some market analysis. Customer retention is down 28% since you started your efficiency initiatives. 3 of our biggest clients have requested contract modifications due to quality concerns. Our best supplier, Hartwell Manufacturing, terminated their 15-year partnership last month because you cut their contract by 60%. The room was silent except for the rustling of papers as board members reviewed the documents. Janet, I'm calling for an immediate vote of no confidence in Chelsea Pemberton's operational leadership. Her cost-cutting measures have endangered employee safety, destroyed customer relationships, and violated the fundamental principles this company was built on. Gordon, Chelsea said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know about the ownership structure. If I had known. If you had known, you would have treated me differently based on my financial position rather than my professional qualifications. I adjusted my watch band one final time. That tells me everything I need to know about your leadership philosophy. Janet called for the vote. It was unanimous. Chelsea Pemberton was removed from all operational responsibilities effective immediately, but I wasn't done. Wesley, I want you to draft new supplier agreements that restore our local partnerships. Janae, work with Aaron Murphy to develop safety protocols that meet federal standards, not just cost targets. And I want a complete audit of employee satisfaction and retention metrics. I looked around the table at the board members, good people who'd been trying to balance family loyalty with business reality for months. This company employs 127 people. They have families, mortgages, kids in college. They're not line items in a cost optimization spreadsheet. They're the reason Edmund Pemberton built this business in the first place. Chelsea gathered her papers quietly. What happens to me now? That's up to Edmund, I said. But operationally, you're done making decisions that affect other people's livelihoods. As she left the conference room, I felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. Owning 72% of a company isn't just about financial returns. It's about stewardship. The next 3 hours were crucial for establishing operational stability. Janae and I worked through the immediate priorities while Wesley handled the legal documentation. First order of business was calling an all-hands meeting for 4 p.m. The main conference room filled quickly. Word travels fast in a company of 127 people, especially when security escorts start happening and board meetings get called on short notice. I could see the tension in their faces, the same look employees get when they're wondering if their jobs just disappeared. Folks, I said, standing at the head of the table where Chelsea had fired me 6 hours earlier, I know today's been confusing, so let me clarify what's happened and what comes next. Aaron Murphy was sitting in the front row, his notebook ready, good kid. Behind him, I recognized faces from the manufacturing floor, the accounting department, customer service, people who'd been here through good years and bad ones. Chelsea Pemberton is no longer in an operational role at this company. The board has asked me to assume immediate oversight of day-to-day operations while we transition to new leadership. A hand went up in the back. Sarah from HR, probably 45 years old with 2 kids in high school. Mr. Winchester, does this mean layoffs are coming? Sarah, it means exactly the opposite. We're going to be hiring. The cost-cutting measures from the past 8 months are being reversed, effective immediately. The room shifted. You could feel the collective exhale. Let me be specific about what that means. First, we're restoring the supplier partnerships that were terminated. Hartwell Manufacturing has agreed to resume their contracts starting Monday. Second, we're reinstating the safety protocols that were modified to cut costs. Third, we're conducting an audit of customer satisfaction to repair the relationships that have been damaged. Tony, one of the security guards from this morning, was standing by the door. He gave me a small nod. Now, I want to address something directly. This company was built on the principle that good work deserves good compensation and job security. Edmund Pemberton understood that loyal employees are the foundation of sustainable business. That hasn't changed. A voice from the middle of the room. What about the efficiency initiatives? The modernization plans. Efficiency doesn't mean cutting corners on quality or safety. Modernization doesn't mean treating people like expendable resources. We're going to grow this company the right way by investing in our people and maintaining the standards that built our reputation. After the meeting, I spent time walking through the manufacturing floor. Machinery that had been idle was being brought back online. The overseas supplier contracts were being terminated, and our local partners were ramping up production to fill the gaps. I found myself in Edmund's old office around 6 p.m. Janet had given me the keys, said it was time to make it official. The desk still had his reading glasses on it, a half-finished crossword puzzle from the morning he'd had his heart attack. Edmund had been more than my father's business partner. He'd been a mentor, the guy who taught me that financial success without ethical foundation was just elaborate theft. Looking around his office, I could hear his voice. Gordon, the numbers always tell a story. Make sure it's a story you can be proud of. My phone buzzed, text message from Aaron. Mr. Winchester, Hartwell just confirmed full production restart. Customer calls have been positive all afternoon. Thank you for believing in us. That's when it hit me. This morning, Chelsea had tried to fire me for being outdated. But what she called outdated thinking was actually timeless business sense. Treat people well, maintain quality standards, build relationships for the long term. Aaron knocked on the office door around 7 p.m. Sir, I wanted to give you the preliminary numbers from today's supplier meetings. Come in, Aaron, and stop calling me sir. We're colleagues now. He sat down across from the desk, his excitement barely contained. The supplier restoration is going to cost about $200,000 in restart fees and expedited shipping. But the quality improvements should reduce customer complaints by 60% within the first quarter. What about employee morale? Off the charts. People are actually smiling again. Susan in accounting said it's the first time in months she's felt secure in her job. Aaron, what did you learn today? He thought for a moment. That leadership isn't about making the hard choices. It's about making the right choices even when they're expensive. That's exactly right. And what else? That respect isn't something you can demand. You have to earn it by respecting other people first. Smart kid, he was going to do well here. As I walked out of the building that evening, I thought about the ghost of 2009. This time, the employees kept their jobs, the suppliers kept their contracts. The customers got their quality back. Most importantly, the company got its soul back. Chelsea Pemberton learned a valuable lesson about market analysis. Sometimes the biggest risk in your portfolio is the assumption that you understand who you're working for. The security guards, Tony and his partner, were finishing their shift as I headed to the parking garage. "Have a good evening, Mr. Winchester," Tony said. "You too, gentlemen. See you tomorrow." Tomorrow. That felt good to say. Here's what I want you to understand. At some point in your career, someone younger, hungrier, and more desperate is going to try to push you aside. They'll call your experience outdated thinking and your principles inefficient. They'll mistake your patience for weakness and your ethics for naivety. When that day comes, remember that wisdom isn't obsolete just because it's not new. The fundamentals of good business: treat people well, maintain quality, build lasting relationships. These aren't old-fashioned ideas. They're the foundation that everything else is built on. Stand your ground, know your worth. And when they try to show you the door, make sure you're the one holding the keys.